Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So this week we're heading to Ixalan Standard for a pretty crazy deck built around one of the new mechanics from Ixalan. This is a deck I'm calling Revolt Treasure Ramp, and it sounds a bit crazy, and that's because it is, but it has some really interesting and fun and potentially powerful stuff going on. So as you can see, $85 in the paper world, 52 ticks on Magic Online, so not a bad price for a really spicy deck. A quick reminder before we break down Revolt Treasure Ramp for Ixalan Standard. If you enjoy Budget Magic and the other series here on the channel, it would be awesome of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So the basic idea of Revolt Treasure Ramp is to ramp into some huge things, and we start off kinda typical with 4 copies of Gift of Paradise, 2 New Horizons, basically 6 3-mana ramp spells, get us from 3 mana to 5 mana starting on turn 4, and just helps us cast really big things really quickly. So nothing too crazy here, just kind of typical ramp stuff. However, things get a little spicier when we get to our treasure producer. So we have 4 copies of Treasure Map, which is one of my picks for most underrated cards in Ixalan. Comes down early on turn 2, gives us some scrying to get rid of bad cards, help us find our good cards, eventually flips around and makes 3 treasures, which is a lot of ramp in and of itself. And then we also have Treasure Trove, which makes us a treasure each turn. It looks like it has a downside of making our opponent attack us each turn. Thing is, our opponent's going to be attacking us anyway, because we don't really have many blockers in the early game, so there's not actually as much of a downside to Treasure Trove as you might think at first glance. The big deal is Treasure Trove just continually gives us a treasure turn after turn after turn after turn, and that treasure is really key to our plans, because what we're trying to set up is the Revolt part of our deck, which is Aid from the Cowl. So Aid from the Cowl, super powerful, but hasn't really seen much play in Standard. 5 mana enchantment, and it has Revolt, where at the beginning of our end step, if we had a permanent leave the battlefield this turn, we get to reveal the top card of our library. If it's a permanent, it just goes onto the battlefield. Otherwise, we get to put it on the bottom of our library. So our deck is overloaded with permanents. Out of our entire deck, we have 5 non-permanents that we'll talk about later. So our odds of hitting something are incredibly high. Sometimes it'll just be a land, other times it'll be big huge things. So you can kind of see the synergy here. With Trove of Temptation out, we have a treasure every single turn. We can sack that treasure, hopefully cast something, but even if we don't cast anything, it gives us a free Revolt trigger that we can just flip something with Aid from the Cowl every single turn, again and again and again and again, hopefully hit some really huge, massive things to take over the game. So what are we trying to flip with our Aid from the Cowl? And the 2 sweetest cards are Overwhelming Splendor and Sandworm Convergence. So the sweet thing about both of these cards is they're enchantments, and decks in Standard, they're worried about fighting artifacts, they're worried about fighting indestructible, annoying creatures like the Scarab God and Hazoret. They're worried about fighting planeswalkers, but one thing they're not super concerned about is enchantments, which means if we can get an Overwhelming Splendor or a Sandworm Convergence on the battlefield, short of running into like a random Vraska Relic Seeker, they're pretty much sticking around. And they are both incredibly powerful. So Overwhelming Splendor is basically super humility. It just makes it so all of our opponent's things are 1/1s, which takes care of all of those problematic creatures. Your Scarab God, it's a 1/1. It's just a 1/1 with no abilities. Your Hazoret, it's a 1/1 with no abilities. Your Winding Constrictors and all the other powerful creatures that see play in Standards, your Rogue Refiner doesn't draw you a card, you can't make tokens with your Whirler Virtuoso, they're all just worthless 1/1s thanks to Overwhelming Splendor, which buys us a ton of time, and a ton of time means we get a ton more flips with Aid from the Cowl from our treasure tokens. Sandworm Convergence is kind of our finisher. It just makes a 5/5 worm every single turn, and while that might not sound like a lot, after 2 or 3 turns, that is a lot of power and toughness worth of worms that are crushing rushing in at our opponent to close out the game. Also, occasionally, making creatures without flying not be able to attack is relevant. If our opponent has like Whirler Virtuoso is a big flyer, if we run into the odd favorable wind deck, Glorybringer could potentially be a threat. So it does shut down some attacking, but it's mostly there to just be almost unkillable in our current format and make a ton of huge worm tokens. Apart from our enchantments, the other things we're looking to flip with our aid from the Cowl are some dinosaurs. So we have 4 Burning Sun's Avatar and 2 Verdant Sun's Avatar. So Burning Sun's Avatar is weirdly good right now. It kills a lot of the most popular creatures in the standard format. Coming down as a 6/6 means it actually blocks Hazoret, it blocks the Scarab God, and it's killing Hostage Shakers, Rogue Refiners, Whirler Virtuoso, Servants of the Conduit, you name it. Plus it's going in our opponent's face, which gives us a way to deal some direct damage to close out the game. Verdant Sun Avatar, kind of a wombo combo with our Sandworm Convergence. We get a 5/5 each turn and gain 5 life, but really it just helps make sure we're out of the danger zone from things like Lightning Strike, from things like Hazoret activations, to make sure we're at a high enough life total that once we gum up the board, we're not going to die to weird spells and so forth. So another really powerful option, and remember, apart from getting a free look for these cards with aid from the Cowl every single turn thanks to our treasures, we can also just ramp into them with our normal ramp spell. So it's completely possible we just play a 3-mana ramp spell, a 3-mana ramp spell, and by turn 5 we're casting like Verdant Sun Avatars and casting our big enchantments. So that's the other possibility of the deck, is we don't even need aid from the Cowl necessarily to play these huge, really powerful, impactful enchantments and creatures. As far as the rest of the deck, removal-wise, 2 Ixalan's Binding. Nice because it is a permanent, so we can flip it off of our aid from the Cowl. Really good way to just get rid of Scarab Gods forever, hit a random Planeswalker, takes care of pretty much any problem in the format. And then our spells, the only non-flippable things from aid from the Cowl are 3 Fumigates to Settle the Wreckage. Our deck can be a little bit slow, but having a Fumigate or a Settle the Wreckage to stabilize while we're looking to get our aid from the Cowl online, get enough ramp to start casting our 7-drops or 8-drops, is often enough to buy us the time we need to start just casting our huge haymakers turn after turn after turn after turn. As far as the mana base, the other sweet Revolt trick we have is a bunch of deserts. So these cards are interesting on their own. Ramanop Ruins can get in some damage, win the game for us. We have a lot of ramp, which means we can afford to sack lands in the late game. Scavenger Grounds, really good at taking care of Scarab God activations, God Pharaoh gift decks. Oasis could get a little extra damage, like Shephet Dunes. But the other thing to consider with all these is Scavenger Grounds, for example, is 2 mana, sack a land, trigger aid from the Cowl. It gives us a free Revolt trigger for 2 mana. Oasis does it for only 3 mana. So while ideally we'll have our treasure tokens to take care of this, we can use our deserts for minimal value just to get free looks at overwhelming splendors and huge dinosaurs from our aid from the Cowl each turn. Rest of the mana base, bunch of dual lands, 1 Spire of Industry for mana fixing. We have a bunch of different color stuff in our sideboard, so it's nice to have a 5-color land. Also some basic lands. Speaking of the sideboard, we get a bunch more removals. Slash of Talons for the early game. Desert's Hold is a sneaky answer to Hazarets and Scarab Gods, and it gains us some life against Ramanop Red. More Ixalan's Binding, the 4th Fumigate. Then we get to kind of the crazy stuff. 3 negates. Remember, no actual blue lands in our deck, so we're using our treasures and our 3-mana ramp spells that make any color of mana to allow us to cast our negates. Vance's Blasting Cannons for control matchups. Another direct damage spell once it flips over, but mostly just to draw us extra cards each turn to keep up with blue-black control and approach of the Second Suns. And then 3 Lost Legacy. Again, like Negate, we don't have any black lands, but we can cast it with our treasures, with our weird ramp spells. Just shuts down approach from the Second Sun, other decks that are very reliant on one specific card to win the game. And that is Revolt Treasure Ramp for Standard, and that's our Budget Magic deck for this week. So this deck, it's really fun. It's just really unique. It's really fun. It's competitive enough that we can definitely pick up some wins with it against tier decks. Overwhelming Splendor is insane. Sandworm Convergence is surprisingly good. The dinosaurs are powerful. We do occasionally run into the ramp deck problem where we just don't draw our pieces in the right order. We can be a little bit slow if we don't have a Wrath. We can get our stuff countered. So I don't think we're breaking the format or anything, but the deck is really unique. It plays some just really sweet, cool cards, and when it's doing its thing, thing. Its thing is super awesome. It is just really, really fun to play. So I think we're kind of like in the middle in terms of how competitive the deck is, but it makes up for whatever it's lacking in terms of raw competitiveness, which is spicy, fun coolness and the really awesome things that it can do. So anyway, I'll stop rambling on about Revolt Treasure Map. Let's get to the video so you can see how it plays. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, take a second and click that like button down below. It's a great way to help support the channel for free. And you can find the next video in the playlist right here.